Yes, thank you. Ms Meadows, I believe. Please come forward. And would you mind stating your full name for the record, please?
Jodie Elizabeth Meadows.
And do you wish to affirm or swear an oath?
Affirm, please. I, Jodie Elizabeth Meadows, sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence that I give to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Please sit down. Mr Evans.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms Meadows, you've been summoned to appear before the Commission today,
Yes.
and you've been invited to make a statement of your evidence in chief in relation to the matters before the Commission.
Yes.
And I believe you prepared a statement.
Yes.
You have a copy of that in front of you.
Yes, I do.
You've read the contents of the statement. You've signed it.
Yes.
And to the best of your knowledge and belief, it is true and correct.
Yes.
I tender Ms Meadows' statement, Commissioner.
The witness statement of Jodie Elizabeth Meadows dated the 14th of May 2021 and bearing the identifier number GWC.0003.0007.0015 is admitted into evidence as an exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms Nelson.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ms Meadows, this afternoon I'm going to take you through generally the process, the functions and powers of the Gaming Evasion Commission, which I refer to as the GWC, and then I'll take you to some specific meetings. So your witness statement, which as we've heard is exhibit GWC.003.0007.0015, explains you've been a member of the GWC since mid-2018, is that correct?
Yes, August, I think.
You just keep your voice up a little bit.
Sure,
Thank
August,
you.
I believe.
And you were appointed to the GWC by the Minister for a 2-year term initially,
Yes,
and you've since been reappointed.
yes.
And your original appointment followed an expression of interest that you lodged with the Department of Premier and Cabinet in their board area.
Yes, so I'm not sure how my appointment came about, because I wrote a letter to the Minister expressing an interest in joining boards, but I also put an application up on the same day onto On Board WA, and so I'm not sure which of those two avenues the approach came through.
I see, thank you. And you explain in your witness statement that you've had extensive experience as a chartered accountant. I think it's since 1993, and that included working in private practice and as an auditor.
I believe I qualified in 1993. I started working at Pricewaterhouse in 1990.
And you've also had experience being on a board. However, would you agree that that experience is largely in the last 3 years?
Yes, in the last 3 years. Yeah, I have sat on other, well, I wouldn't call them boards, but like a franchise council about 10 years ago, but most of my governance experience sitting on the boards is more current, but I have had board-facing experience as a CFO.
Thank you. And was your appointment to the board of the GWC your first appointment after completing the Australian Institute of Company Directors course?
No.
What other board were you appointed to?
Get the dates right. I sat on the Audit and Risk Committee for the Curtin University Student Guild. Get the timing right. And then I believe it was GWC.
So is it fair to say that your experience with casino gaming prior to being appointed to the GWC was limited to auditing the accounts of the Burswood Resort Casino, which you did when you were at PricewaterhouseCoopers in 1993?
My experience with casino gaming
Yes.
is limited to auditing the financial statements. No, I've certainly had quite a bit of experience in going to the casino and watching people gaming there.
In a personal capacity?
Yes.
And how often prior to 2018 would you have gone to the casino in a personal capacity?
There was a period of several years where I would have gone probably once a week in the company of somebody who gambled quite a lot.
But you didn't gamble yourself?
Not very much at all, no.
And what was it about that experience of watching that person that caused you to want to take up this appointment on the GWC in 2018, or was there no connection?
I guess I understood quite a bit about gaming and wagering on the races. I also understood what it was like for people who had gambling problems, or for the people that were living with people that had gambling problems.
And have you been able to use that experience whilst you've been on the GWC since
Yes.
2018? In what way have you used that experience?
When the casino in particular, if they come in and demonstrate a new game, not an electronic gaming machine game, but a new table game, I have a better understanding than most of the commissioners about how that game would work in reality, in real life.
Are you talking about gambling addiction?
No, I'm talking about the understanding of how the game would work, where the chips would be placed and what the dealer would do and
Right.
and how the outcome would be paid.
And the board as it's constituted today, would you say, the only one with that level of practical experience?
I would think so.
In your opinion, do you have the most extensive financial experience of everyone on the board at the moment?
There is another gaming and wagering commissioner who also is a chartered accountant. I couldn't attest to whether she had more experience than me, but we probably have similar levels.
And do the other members of the committee rely on the two of you when it comes to the accounts or the financial aspect of the work?
Yes.
I think it might be as well if we name the other board member just for the record.
Carmelina Fiorenti.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, going to your induction and training, and perhaps if we look at your statement, GWC 0003 0007 0015 at 0006, paragraph 16 to 18. Thank you. Now, you're talking particularly in this portion from 16 to 18 about your induction. And is it fair to say that you had, in essence, a 30-minute discussion with Mr. Michael Connolly, who was then the Deputy Director General and the Chief Casino Officer, and were offered some links to find the legislation and annual reports and policies of the GWC?
Yes.
And that's the extent of your induction?
Yes.
And at paragraph 18.2 of your statement at page 6, you refer to Mr. Connolly walking you through the contents of a folder.
Yes.
What did he point out in particular in relation to 18.2.2, the applicable legislation relevant to the GWC? If you can't recall.
Yeah, I don't recall going through the legislation in any level of detail at that session.
Did he give you any instruction on the structure of the GWC?
On the structure of the GWC, can you explain?
Or how it interacted with the department?
Yes, that the GWC was supported by the department.
And did he go through what that support would look like in practical application?
That the department would prepare board papers for us to review before the board meetings, and that the department provided, regulatory support, and all the inspectors worked for the department.
So he went through how many inspectors worked for the department?
He didn't say specifically how many inspectors there were. No.
Well, what else did he tell you about the role of the inspectors?
I don't recall specifically.
And what did he tell you about what you've said at 18.2.3, which is your role as a member of the GWC? What did you say your role was?
Although I don't recall the specific words that were used, our role was to attend the meetings, review the papers, attend the meetings, and make decisions around the matters that were raised within the board papers.
Did he tell you what type of matters were going to be in the board papers?
I don't recall specifically that being discussed.
Did the chair, who at that time was Mr. Duncan Ord, did he give you any introduction or any induction at all?
No.
When did you first have a conversation with him?
The morning of my first meeting,
And what was that conversation?
it was an introduction to each other, pleasantries.
Did Mr. Connolly put you in touch with any other member of the commission before your first meeting?
No.
Were you informed in that conversation with Mr. Connolly about the delegation that were in place, that there was a register or not, or who performed what roles under which
No.
bits of the legislation?
No.
Were you aware that there was a delegation architecture in place?
In that meeting? No.
When did you first become aware of that?
That items were delegated.
Yes.
I don't recall when I was first aware that items were delegated. I don't recall that.
In that meeting with Mr. Connolly, did you have a conversation about the role of the chief casino officer?
No.
Were you told there was such a position?
Not in that meeting, no.
When did you find out about that position?
I was already aware that the position of Chief Casino Officer existed from when I worked at Pricewaterhouse, and it was in the Casino Act. So I did know that that position existed.
But you didn't have a conversation with Mr. Connolly about how that was going to work in practice?
I don't recall that, no.
Thank you. If we could go to 0007 page of the statement, thank you, which is paragraph 23 in particular. You refer to not receiving any formal training on the performance of your role as a member of the GWC. Have you had occasion to think about what formal training might have been beneficial for you to have received?
In relation to regulation,
Or any aspect of your role of the GWC, what would have assisted you?
no, I haven't actually had an opportunity to think about that. I guess that's the question, and the answer is that I haven't specifically thought about what the training would look like.
Were there any aspects that you felt you were deficient in when you first started? You mentioned regulation.
Yes. When I first started as a commissioner, my understanding was the legislation as I'd read it and interpreted it myself. So I would have thought that training into, how a deeper level of understanding of how that legislation worked, and a deeper level of understanding of how regulation, of casinos and of wagering as well, would have been of assistance.
And what particular decisions would that have assisted you in making?
We made many decisions in every meeting that I attended that were all around regulation and legislation. So I believe it would have assisted with many decisions.
Before we go there, do you know if the GWC was ever given any direction or statement of appointment from the Minister as to what the regulatory direction was to be?
I'm not aware of anything from the Minister.
If we go to paragraph 55, please, of the statement, which is at 0015. You state in this paragraph that it was your understanding that the Commission needed to be mindful of the public interest in protecting jobs and tourism and taxes that arise from the continued operation of the casino. Is that a fair summary of what's in that paragraph?
Yes, that was certainly one of the factors that came into decision making.
And was that discussed formally during the meetings, or was...
Yes, we would quite often talk about the wording that I have there, that we had the ability to regulate the casino out of business.
And during that discussion, was there ever a conversation about the tension between keeping the casino in business but being a regulator and knowing that by keeping the casino in business and increasing their business, you might actually be causing, that increase in business might arise from problem gambling or...
Absolutely, yes. So getting the tension right, or the balance right, was something that we talked about all the time. That we could regulate the casino out of business, but we also needed to be fulfilling our role as a regulator.
And what did you see as the essence of your role as a regulator? What was the philosophy behind regulating the casino? Like, if you were to regulate it out of business, what would be the purpose behind that?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Were you trying to reduce social harm to particular problem individuals, or were you trying to reduce criminal conduct generally in the casino, or what was it that you were trying to achieve when you were wanting to regulate the casino?
Like the overarching principle of what we were trying to achieve.
Correct, yes.
So the overarching principle of what the GWC was trying to regulate or deliver was the overseeing of the casino, RAWA, community gambling, ensuring that the rules of the gaming was fair, that return to player was being followed, that the rules of the games were being fair, that the casino licensee and the casino employees were licensed, that harm minimisation from gambling, responsible service of gambling was in play, and then also to ensure that the public interest and that casino revenue and therefore casino taxes were being calculated correctly.
Okay, thank you. We look at the GWC website currently, which is document PUB.0002.0001.0716. And under the objectives, the broad objectives of the Gaming and Wagering Commission in relation to the gaming and wagering industry are to approve or withhold approvals of licences, permits, certificates and authorisation, take steps to minimise harm, and to seek, receive, disseminate or publish information. Have you had occasion to look at Section 7 of the Gaming Wagering Commission Act, which deals with the purposes of the GWC?
I'm sure I have. I don't remember it word for word.
I'll take you there in a minute. But my proposition to you is that the first dot point is only one aspect of what's in the legislation, that it's a broader role than just approving, withholding approvals of licence, permits, certificates and authorisations. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, and I would also say that the GWC has not had any input into the writing of what's on this website. Presumably a PR company wrote this
Okay, thank you. If we look at Section 7 of the Gaming Wagering Commission Act, you can see at Section 7(1) subsection C, so essentially what the objective was in that first dot point on the website.
Yes.
Thank you. And if we could go back to the whole of Section 7. Is it also a duty of the GWC to formulate policies for the scrutiny, control and regulation of gaming, which is Section 7B,
Yes.
and to keep the conduct, extent and character of gaming and wagering under review?
Which point is that, sorry?
At the top of the second page in subsection B.
Yes.
And at Section 7(1)(f), which is over the next page, thank you. The GWC has a power to advise the Minister of its own motion as to any matter relating to gambling.
Yes.
Was that ever done during your time on the Commission?
My understanding is that the Director General of the department, Duncan Ord, used to meet with the Minister quite regularly. Did we formally offer any motions with matters relating to gambling? In December, I understand that the Director General was going to be contacting the Minister to advise him of our position with regard to the Crown situation at the time, and he was going to be formally advising the Minister of what our position was and to ensure that the Minister was comfortable with that.
So it's December 2020.
Yes.
And did Mr. Ord report back to you that that had been done?
No, he didn't report back to us that that had been done. The next meeting that we had was February, when the Bergen report had come out.
Right. We'll go into that in some detail later on. But was Mr. Ord reporting to the Minister, to your knowledge, as the Chair of the GWC or as the Director General of the Department?
In that particular instance, I believe as the Chair of the GWC.
And was that a task that the GWC had asked him
No.
to perform?
No, he suggested that he would do it.
Was there any time, so that can be taken down, was there any time set aside for the GWC to consider what role they should perform as a regulator, or of a strategic discussion?
No, in 2019, we asked for a strategic offsite day to be organised, but the department advised that they didn't have the capacity to organise such a day.
And did the Chair have the support for that? Did he support that proposition?
He supported the proposition. I don't think that he objected to the concept of the strategic offsite, but was in agreement that the department didn't have the capacity to organise or facilitate a day like that.
Was there any discussion about how those resources could be made available to the GWC?
At that particular time or generally?
At that particular time?
I don't recall exactly, no.
You refer at paragraph 78 of your statement about the concentration of knowledge, and you use the phrase in certain individuals. Who are you talking about?
Mick Connolly, Barry Sargent.
Perhaps if we go to the statement GWC 0003 0007 0015 at yes, thank you. A concentration of critical knowledge with a select few individuals, or even one individual. So apart from Mr. Connolly and Mr. Sargent, are you referring to anyone else?
No. No.
How did that exacerbate the resourcing issue?
I'll give a specific example. We had been trying for quite some time, well over a year, to have what we call a matrix, or what we referred to as a matrix that led to some KPIs, where we wanted to have prepared for each area of legislation that we were required to be responsible for, what were we doing against that, and what were the KPIs that we would use to measure whether we were being successful against those measures. And after over a year of regularly asking for this to happen and offering to do it ourselves in off-site sessions, we then decided to hire some consultants to help with that. So Risk West was engaged to assist with the process of developing this matrix that led to some KPIs. And it was explained to us that that was difficult because the person that would be required to brief Risk West was Mr. Connolly. He was coming up for some 2 weeks holiday. He cut it down to 1 week's holiday to then sit with Risk West and brief them to help prepare this matrix for us, which I guess if I can give some context, meetings are about 3 hours over 11 months in the year. It's 33 hours, works out to be about 4 days of actual GWC time. It's a very complex industry with a lot of inherent risks, and we wanted to have some sort of overview where we could see if we were doing what we were supposed to be doing. Once we had that, you could put, red, green, are we ticking that box, dashboard type scenario, and put some risk references or rate the risks against each of the areas, and then put some firepower at the higher risk areas. That's what we were trying to achieve. So we engaged Risk West to do that, but due to COVID and the availability of the people at the department, that got stalled.
You referred to we trying to get this off the ground. Who was we apart from yourself?
The GWC.
So all the members?
In particular, Colleen Haywood, Carmelina Fiorenti and myself.
And were you having this conversation, just taking the COVID as a reference, were you having this conversation from the beginning of 2019 or?
No, I believe it first was raised around October 2018, and then throughout 2019 to the point where December 2019 we were particularly frustrated, and this was when we requested the engagement of external consultants. They were engaged in December to start the work in January 2020, and then I believe COVID was 8-9 weeks later.
And who engaged the external consultants in December 2020?
The GWC.
Who in particular on the GWC?
I don't know, but I believe Mick Connolly selected Risk West.
You've mentioned KPIs. I'll just ask you a few questions about that. We'll go to paragraph 50, which is 0014. And you've said that you thought that the timeliness of the department's response to your request was due to resourcing.
Yes.
And who was it that told you, or the committee that in particular? Who was it who said that?
The two people that were usually present who are from the department, so the Director General and Mick Connolly.
I'll take you to a agenda paper from the 19th of August 2018. Would you have been at that meeting? You were appointed on the 1st of August.
Yes.
It's GWC 0002.0016.0239 at page 0497. And it goes to 0503. We'll just go back to the first page, which is 0497. In the second paragraph, the current KPIs have been in place for many years. However, in 2011, as part of the annual audit process, auditors recommended the Commission formally approve target KPIs for the coming year. And this was done in 2018.
Yeah, there's two completely separate KPI conversations that have been going on. And if you'll see throughout the minutes, there's reference to, there's two KPI discussions. This KPI discussion is around the KPIs issued by the Office of the Auditor General to determine whether the Gaming and Wagering Commission is fulfilling its role, quite different from what I was talking about before, which is more like a framework to ensure that we're meeting these targets. We have one KPI from the Office of the Auditor General, and it is dollars spent running the Gaming and Wagering Commission divided by number of infringements issued. That's the key performance indicator as to whether we're doing our role properly, is the number of infringements that we give out. And so that's a different conversation.
But did you have some knowledge about this particular, how this progressed?
Yes.
What can you tell the Commission about that?
I'm just trying to remember what year it was. In 1 year, there were 10 infringements given out by the GWC. The next year, there was only one. There was reasons why there was 10 given out in 1 year, and then there was only one given out the next year. We received a black mark or against our from the Office of Auditor General for having fewer infringements 1 year to the next. And therefore we had been requesting to have the KPIs changed because it was a flawed KPI. It assumed that the number of infringements that we were issuing was a reflection of whether we were doing a good job or not. We wanted to have that reviewed. We asked to have it reviewed for the 2020 the year ending 30 June 2019. We were advised that the Officer of the Auditor General and the department were too busy to review it. The next year it was reviewed, and the reply or the response from the Office of Auditor General was that the KPI was satisfactory, and that would continue to be our KPI.
Thank you. If we could go in this document to page 0498, which is the second page. It's very hard to see, I know. Thank you. So under casino, under the heading gaming, inspections performed 90. Is that, that's not only in relation to the casino, is it?
No, I believe that below that is
Oh, sorry, yes.
casino.
That's what I'm trying to see. So casino inspections, it's 70. Is that correct? Thank you. And then investigations 57 and audits completed 305. And so that's for the financial year ending 30 June 2019. Would you expect that those KPIs would continue in the further years, the coming years? Just asking that question because they're the same targets for the latest.
I can't see what's at the top, sorry. What's...
I think the witness is asking for the context in which that appears.
Okay.
So this is the number of inspections.
It appears to be the target, the KPI target. It's the second page of that memo that we were just looking at.
I understand that the number of inspections requested has increased in our latest.
Okay, we'll just go and look at the latest one, which is from the meeting of the 15th of December 2020. GWC 0002-0016.0345 at page 0426. Could have page 0426, please. And if we go to the next page, and at the top you can see it's for the financial year ending 30 June 2021. And then under casino inspections, casino investigations, casino audits completed, it appears to be the same numbers, 70, 57.
My understanding is that the KPI is not how many inspections are done, it is how many infringements are issued.
I see. Okay. We'll leave that. Thank you. You mentioned in your statement you were given an iPad to access the board agenda items and minutes.
Yes.
And were you also given an email address?
Yes.
And a contact list for other board members?
Yes.
Did you have secretarial support?
From the Commission?
Yes.
From the department, or in that they prepared all of our papers, yes.
But there was no separate admin support that was just for the GWC?
There was consistent people that we dealt with. I don't know if they did anything else within the department outside of the GWC.
And apart from Mr. Connolly, who were those people?
I only know their first names, Emily, Stephanie and Jocelyn were the people that I mostly contacted. There was also support from the people that prepared the papers, the regulatory advisors, I think they're called.
And what type of support did the regulatory advisors give you?
They wrote papers that were presented or that were included in our board papers.
And who controlled the agenda items for each meeting?
Who
Or
controlled?
who decided what was on the agenda?
Well, we have a set layout of the agenda, of which quite a few items are standing items. Items that would appear on the agenda were sometimes they would appear because that request had come through to the department, and then those matters would be put on the agenda. And other times items would be in the agenda because we requested them, or because of some sort of action that we'd taken in a previous meeting. For example, we might be presented with some information, we might then issue a show cause notice to Crown, and then in the next meeting there would be an agenda item because of action we'd taken in the previous meeting. Other things, that might be an application for a permit or whatever, and then that would appear in the agenda.
The agenda and the board pack appeared to be quite voluminous. Would you
Yes.
agree with that?
Yes.
And I think you said in your statement it'd take anything from 3 hours upwards to a day to read through some of the papers.
Yes.
And you're also required to attend to emails between meetings.
Yes.
What type of matters were dealt with by email?
Sometimes we would have rotary resolutions. The first year that I was on the Gaming and Wagering Commission, it was very rare to receive an email. There were certainly some emails around the time of the 60 Minutes episode.
So that's in August 2019.
I can't recall the exact month. But at that time there was a flurry of emails, and in more recent times there has been a significant increase in the number of emails.
And the flurry of emails around the time of the 60 Minutes media report, was that between GWC members, those emails, or was it between GWC members and the department?
Between the department and the GWC.
And can you recall generally what those emails were about?
Yes, there was emails suggesting that it was going to be on, so that if you should perhaps watch it. There was emails around the minister asking for a briefing, around a wording of a press release, and what else? And then it was an agenda item for our next meeting.
And do you know if the minister was given a briefing?
The GWC received a copy of a briefing note that we were told was being given to the minister.
And who prepared that note?
I assume Mr. Connolly did, or somebody who worked for Mr. Connolly.
You've also mentioned in your statement that you have asked to become a member of the Internal Audit Committee for the department.
I haven't asked. I was asked.
You
to do
were
it.
asked, sorry.
Yes.
And who asked you to do that?
Duncan Ord.
And is it still the case that the committee has not yet met?
Yes.
And do you know who else is on the committee?
No. Oh, sorry. Last week, Duncan Ord told me the name of the newly appointed independent chair. I can't recall his name, but I don't know anyone else who's on it.
And once you'd settled into the role as a commission member, did you form some sense of what role the Chief Casino Officer appointed, Mr. Connolly, performed?
In his capacity as the Chief Casino Officer or in his capacity as the...
What, was it clear to you when he was wearing one hat as opposed to the other hat, or was it not clear?
No, it wasn't clear, no.
So what, after you'd settled into the role and attended a few meetings, what did you think that the Chief Casino Officer's purpose was?
I think the Chief Casino Officer's purpose is just to fulfil some roles under the Casino Act, some fairly minor roles. The reference to the Chief Casino's title was quite rarely used.
Were you aware that there were regular operational meetings between the department, gaming operations divisions and Crown?
Yes,
How did you become aware of those?
just through general conversation at the meetings.
Would you be shown the minutes of those meetings?
No. It would be more that Mr. Connolly would say, when I caught up with Crown this month, this that's not an operational matter, so we didn't really get involved in what was discussed in those meetings. If it was important, it would end up on our agenda.
So you understood that the matters that were discussed at that meeting would generally end up on your agenda?
No, that they were just operational matters.
But what do you mean by operational matters? What type of matters are operational?
The timing of when the inspectors are going to go there, I guess that wouldn't be discussed because then they would know when they were coming. Operational matters. I'm not really sure.
Did you ever turn your mind to the capacity in which Mr. Connolly was attending the meetings that you just mentioned? Did you ever turn your mind to that issue? What he was Chief Casino Officer. Do you know if he held any other positions?
Well, he's the Deputy Director General of the department. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Did
Did you turn your mind to the capacity in which he was attending those meetings? Because you've just given us a description of what you thought the Chief Casino Officer's role was.
Yeah.
I'm only asking you whether you turned your mind
No, I
to that
didn't.
issue.
I didn't.
Did you ever feel that the matters that appeared on the agenda of the GWC had been previously discussed at these operational meetings? You never got that sense?
No.
Crown's required to pay an annual casino gaming licence fee. What was your understanding of how that was applied to the commission or to the department? Where did the money go?
Part of the money is part of the income of the GWC, our top line revenue, and I believe the rest of the money would go to the state.
Why was only part of that licence fee applicable to run the commission?
Well, actually, no, I believe all of it would go there.
And how did you form that belief?
Well, I'm visualising the financial statements in my head and looking at how much the casino tax is each month, and I would think that's both there.
So it was your understanding the practical effect of that the commission received that licence fee and was able to spend the entirety of it. Is that your understanding?
In managing the casino, yes. In regulating the casino, yes.
Do you recall on the 26th of May 2020 that the GWC received an agenda paper in relation to reducing the annual casino licence fee due to the impact
Yes.
of COVID. And what do you recall about the discussion around that agenda item?
So I recall that there was a paper, the casino was asking for a reduction in the fee. The paper, I believe, from the department suggested a fixed amount as their recommendation that be approved. We had a robust conversation about whether that should happen or not.
Tell me about the robust conversation.
I suggested that was it a good look that the casino tax would be reduced given the current investigations that were going on. We discussed that Crown was in significant or appeared to be in under financial distress from being closed. We discussed the people who worked there. We discussed, I'm not sure of the exact timing, but Crown did ask for the ability to put a mortgage over the casino of $560 million, if I'm correct. It was discussed for quite some time. There were some people who were very much in favour of it, and there were others that weren't as much. As with any board, we have discussions, and we came to an agreement. The agreement that we ended up landing on was to reduce the tax, but align it with the exact number of days that the casino was closed for, not just an arbitrary figure as had been suggested by the department. And we put forward, and that was where we landed. I understand later that the minister then overturned the decision.
Thank you. I'll just take you to that agenda paper, and it's GWC.0002.0016.0300, and at page 38. 0038, thank you. So the author of the paper was a Mr. Beecroft. You're nodding for the transcript. Can you
Yes.
show your answer? Thank you. Was he present at the meeting?
I don't recall.
When the department put forward a recommendation in an agenda paper such as this, would the author of the paper generally appear to argue for the recommendation, or would Mr. Connolly do that on their behalf?
Mr. Connolly would generally do it.
Just so the record's clear, I think Ms Meadows referred to a reduction in the tax. I think you meant the licence fee, didn't you? The application was for a reduction in the licence fee. You see, there are two different things. There's the licence fee that the casino pays, and then there's the tax that goes to the state.
Yeah, okay.
You were
yes.
talking about the licence fee?
Yes, I am,
Thank
yeah.
you.
So the recommendation in the box at the top is for a reduction in effect of $816. $816,750.
Yep.
And is it your evidence that that was not the recommendation that went to the minister?
Can I see the next page, please? I can't recall the exact. I do know that the amount that was suggested, we disagreed with, and a different amount was put forward.
Thank you, that can be taken down. Now, if I could just ask you some questions generally about the process for setting the budget for the GWC. Were you as a member involved in that process?
In setting the budget,
Yes.
No, a budget was presented to us by the Chief Financial Officer.
So you had no role in allocating particular expenses or
Allocating expenses.
or setting any particular dollar amounts for the budget?
No.
Did you have any role as a member of the GWC in discussing how many staff members from the department would support the casino gaming function as opposed to the non-casino gaming function?
As part of the budget process?
Yes.
No.
At all?
I think I see where you're going. In the budget, there's an allocation from the department, which is presumably an arbitrary allocation of the total costs of the department divided by the various areas within the department. So that figure, which is just a division of the pie, and that was the piece of the cost that was allocated to us. Did we discuss on other occasions how many people were allocated, how many physical resources were allocated to us? Yes.
And was that, you've already mentioned earlier in your evidence that you had a discussion about that in relation to going off-site for a strategic workshop. Did you have other conversations about getting more people equivalent FTE to assist you do your role?
Yes.
You did. In what context?
So two examples spring to mind. The first was I suggested that asked if the Gaming and Wagering Commission wrote a letter to the Minister asking for additional resources, would that help or would that assist the pressures that the department were under? I'm not going to say that I was laughed at, but it certainly caused amusement to the public servants in the room that then they explained that writing to the Minister wouldn't produce any more bodies to assist. And I guess another example was, I think it was September 2020, when Mr. Connolly presented an organisational chart of the department where he was proposing to restructure the department to try and ensure that all areas, ensure that our area would receive enough support, because it was very obvious that we weren't getting enough support. We spoke about it very regularly, and he was putting together a proposal of how to restructure the department to try and support us.
And what happened to that proposal?
So that proposal then needed to be, there was some sensitivities around that proposal with any restructure of an organisation that needed to then go through various channels within the public service to facilitate that process happening. As far as I know, it didn't eventuate or hasn't eventuated yet.
We could have the briefing note GWC.00007.0011. Now, after the 60 Minutes report was aired on the 28th of July 2019, you refer to this briefing note having been prepared.
Yes.
And is it correct it was prepared by Mr. Connolly? If you could see page 2 as well, thank you, on the screen.
Yes, it is correct that it was prepared by Mr. Connolly.
And this briefing note that you've given us is unsigned. Are you aware of whether it actually went to the Minister?
I'm not aware if it actually went to the Minister, other than it was attached to an email from Mr. Connolly saying that he would be sending it to the Minister.
And whose,
I have no reason to believe that he didn't.
and under whose direction was this briefing note written?
I believe the Minister asked for information.
So it wasn't instigated by the GWC.
No, it wasn't instigated by the GWC. This was 60 Minutes, obviously, it was on a Sunday night, and these emails came fairly quickly after that, before we had had a meeting.
Thank you. In the last paragraph of the first page, it refers in the last sentence to regulators conducting a teleconference on the 31st of July 2019. Did you take part in that teleconference?
No, I believe by that sentence, regulators are conducting a teleconference, that Mr. Connolly would have attended that teleconference on behalf of the regulators. We didn't all attend.
Did he report back to you what was the outcome of that meeting?
I don't exactly recall. I'm sure he would have, but I don't recall.
So this briefing note's dated the 30th of July 2019. The next GWC meeting was the 27th of August 2019, and Crown presented to the GWC on that occasion. Do you recall that meeting?
Yes.
Do you recall what the topics were that were covered in that presentation?
This is when the CEO and the legal counsel for Crown presented, yes.
And what impression were you left with after that presentation?
After the presentation, we were left with the impression that the 60 Minutes story was not true, that it was a media hype or media beat up, and that Crown were categorically denying or refuting the claims that were in the 60 Minutes episode.
And you mentioned that the attendees from Crown were the CEO and the legal counsel. Was that from Crown Perth or from over east?
It was Josh.
Mr. Preston?
Yes, Mr. Preston.
And Mr. Murray?
No, it was the CEO of Crown from the East Coast.
Mr. Barton, was it?
No, the previous CEO. It was the first time that he'd ever come to a GWC meeting.
And he attended in person?
Yes.
Had the GWC requested this presentation?
Yes, we'd issued a show cause notice, if I recall. Maybe we hadn't.
were you aware that Mr Connolly had emailed Mr Preston, Mr Hume and Mr Murray to ask that particular topics were covered in the presentation?
Was I aware that he had emailed them? No, but now that I recall, we couldn't have issued a show cause notice that he must have invited them to attend, or they must have asked to attend. But I didn't know that he sent an email requesting specific topics to be covered.
I'll show you an email, which is crw.709.021.4377. It's an email sent on the 21st of August 2019 from Mr Connolly to Mr Preston, Mr Hume and Mr Murray. Subject GWC presentation 27th of August. And there are various dot points in which Mr Connolly says, I would specifically request that the presentation cover those dot points. I'll just give you a minute to look at those.
Okay.
Do you recall whether all those dot points were covered in the presentation?
I couldn't recall whether they all were, but it was a very detailed presentation. There's nothing there that's jumping out at me as not being covered.
Commissioners, I just wanted to take the witness to a particular paragraph of her statement in which she has something to say about the veracity of what the presentation contained. I'm wondering whether I should invite you to close the court at that point, or if you'd like me to continue.
Mr. Dharmananda?
It's a little difficult without knowing exactly what the question is, but it might be that we'll see how it goes, Commissioner.
Yeah, and this can only go to state of mind. It won't be going to the underlying facts.
No.
So just proceed, and we'll take it cautiously, though.
Thank you. If I could have the statement of Ms Meadows, GWC.003.0007.0015_0013. And in particular, paragraph 48, which goes over to the next page. We talk about the GWC having been obstructed by Crown. What did you mean by that?
The presentation that we were given in that meeting, the information that we were provided in that meeting, then some of those matters then turned out to be false, as was uncovered in the Bergen inquiry, and by being given incorrect information, we were obstructed in discharging our duties. If we had been given correct information, we would have gone down a different path than we did at the time. The information that were given led us to believe that the 60 minutes story was not true.
I wonder, Commissioner, for the purposes of the record, it might be useful to seek to identify the relevant minutes of the GWC which attaches the relevant presentation. Because that hasn't been done with respect to paragraph 48, nor has my learned friend introduced that material.
the difficulty is that there are certain parts of this which a party has sought a non-publication order.
Yes.
There are other parts that may cross into issues, perhaps not as at the 27th of August 2019, but contextually to other issues in which there are other perhaps non-production or non-publication issues.
Yes, I understand that, Commissioner, is just for the purposes of, at least without displaying the material, but at least identifying the relevant documents by identifying a number might assist for later purposes, because presently we are not exactly sure what particular presentation is being adverted to in line 3 of paragraph 48.
Well, I think, I'll come to you in a minute, Mr. Evans. We can certainly identify the presentation without actually going to it.
Yes.
Right. And leave it at that?
Yes, Commissioner.
So we don't need to go to any other documents at this stage?
No, not at this stage. And if the document or the minutes that we apprehend might be the minutes that paragraph 48 refers to, then certain things would become clearer for us from that.
Mr. Evans?
I was just going to indicate, Commissioner, that an expedient we adopted in another place this morning was to read in only parts of these documents. One of the problems with these agenda papers is they're enormous. Yes. There's objections taken to perhaps 2 paragraphs of them. They may be put off to another day.
I think if we can identify, it may not be necessary to go to the documents at all at this stage, but if we can identify for the record the board pack and the part of the board pack to which this refers, if indeed it is in that board pack, and the minutes of the 27th of August 2019 meeting and the presentation.
Yes, that would, I mean, as far as I can recall, that doesn't affect any of the applications that we have in relation to non-publication. I'm certainly content with that.
Yeah, all right. Ms. Nelson, is that, so if we identify the minutes, sorry, let me start that again. If we identify the board pack for the 27th of August meeting, and in particular the section which relates to this presentation, that's the first thing. The presentation itself, simply by an identifier number, and then the minutes of the 27th of August 2019 meeting, again identifying the section in the minutes which deal with this presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. The board pack is GWC.00016.0016.0283. At this stage, I don't have the actual page number. And it would be between pages 30 and 43, I believe.
All right. Well, I'll give a direction that those exact page numbers be identified and included in the transcript.
Thank you. And the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of August 2019 at GWC.0002.0016.0286.
I've been given a different number. No, that's correct. All right, and that's so. That is correct. The one you've read out, and the presentation.
At this stage, I don't have the actual presentation. I will locate that, Commissioner.
I think I do. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but the number I have is GWC.0001.0009.0001. It is a PowerPoint presentation. That can be corrected if it's not, if it is in fact incorrect.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Commissioner.
And so the only thing left over from that is, and I'll repeat the direction I've given, that the transcript, when it is produced, will have within it the page numbers of the board pack for the 27th of August 2019 meeting.
Thank you. Now, if we could go back to your statement, Ms Meadows, GWC.003.007.0015_0015, so that's at page 15. And in particular, paragraph 54, you're talking about junket operations and your understanding as to the reason changes were made to the legislation. Are you talking in that paragraph about the removal of the regulations relating to junkets?
Yes.
And where did you obtain that understanding as to why?
The very first time I understood that, that was explained to me by Barry Sargent.
So the reason you've said there is because the WA Police and Interpol refused to do background checks on junket operators. Is that correct?
Yes. So there's two, unable and refused. So I believe WA Police were unable to or didn't assist, and then Interpol eventually refused to do it.
And when did you have this conversation with Mr. Sargent?
Certainly before the 60 Minutes episode, quite early on, I would think, in my time on the commission.
Did Mr. Sargent tell you what correspondence or what had been done to make contact with WAPOL and Interpol in order to get these checks done or to attempt to?
He told me that with WA Police, they would put in requests for the information. With Interpol, we didn't really discuss it other than that Interpol said that they would not be able to assist any longer.
And the request for information to WA Police, did Mr. Sargent give you a sense of the time period in which those requests were being put in? What years?
Well, I believe it was in the lead up to the legislation being changed.
And was that the only reason that Mr. Sargent gave to you for the removal of the requirement?
Yes.
And is it your understanding that since then the GWC has relied upon the visa process system, the federal visa process system, to, in a sense, vet unsuitable people coming in as junket operators or participants?
Yes.
Were you aware that Crown was involved or attempted to get involved in assisting some travellers on junkets to get visas?
I believe that was part of the 60 Minutes TV show.
Was that the first time you became
Yes.
aware of that? And was that of concern to you at the time?
That they were assisting people with organising their visas.
Yes.
It was a concern the way it was portrayed in the 60 Minutes event, the 60 Minutes episode.
Was that a matter that was discussed at the GWC at the time, at the 27th of August meeting?
I can't recall exactly what was discussed. However, I do recall that the Office of Home Affairs said that that wasn't the case.
And when was that? When did you find out what the Office of Home Affairs view was?
Yeah, around that time.
And how did you find that out?
I don't recall.
We go to paragraph 56, please, of the statement, which is on the same page, going over into the next page. At 56.1, you discuss how an annual probity and suitability review undertaken for Crown Perth International Operations staff may assist in ensuring the integrity of gaming undertaken by Junkets.
Yes.
How would that assist?
The integrity of the gaming by ensuring that the people that are actually performing the gaming are suitable people, that are not, for want of a better word, assisting with cheating in the gaming.
So it's targeted at the actual Crown Perth employees.
Yes.
And then at 56.2, audits by department inspectors on behalf of the GWC. How would that assist in ensuring the integrity of gaming undertaken by Junkets?
Well, again, to be overseeing that the games are being played correctly.
And at 57 over the next page, say with regards to criminals infiltrating casino operations, I'm aware of the following policies and procedures. 57.1, extensive probity and suitability exercise before the casino licence is issued.
Yes.
So that's a one-off event. How would that assist in the ongoing probity or ongoing integrity of gaming?
Well, that exercise would be to ensure that the owners of the casino licence are not criminals. There's background checks done into key people, police clearances provided.
See, and you also talk about sharing information between the GWC and the Victorian regulator, and that's at 57.1.3. Is there a formal memorandum of understanding in place between those two regulators to ensure that?
I don't know.
So when you say the GWC shares information, are you actually talking about the department sharing that information? Or does the GWC actually correspond with the Victorian regulator?
Where the department shares that information on our behalf.
Do you see, or does the GWC see that information that's shared before it's shared? Do you have an ongoing review of what is shared with Victorian regulator?
So in particular, we're talking about a casino licence. So as an example, there is one underway at the moment where PricewaterhouseCoopers is conducting a probity examination, and once that report is available, that would be shared between GWC and the Victorian regulator. So by sharing, I don't mean sharing of information, we share the report.
So the sharing of information is limited to the review of the Victorian licensee and any close associate probity and suitability assessment. Is that right?
No, I'm sure other information would be shared.
But that's what I'm asking you. What information is shared, and how do you know that, and do you have any oversight of that?
How do I know what information is specifically shared? Do we receive copies of what's shared? No, we don't.
Do you know if there's any information shared about particular junkets that operate in the Victorian jurisdiction?
I believe that there has been some information shared in the past, but not that I've seen.
And how did you come to know that information?
How do I know about that? I can't recall.
In September 2020, Mr. Connolly was provided with the federal body ACLE, their Operation Angove report into allegations of corrupt conduct between the Department of Home Affairs officers and Border Force officers in approving visas for Crown VIPs. Are you aware of that Operation Angove report?
I have heard of it, yes.
You haven't read it?
I haven't read it, no.
Were you aware that Mr. Connolly was provided information about it?
I don't recall.
And could go to the minutes of the 27th of October 2020 meeting, which is GWC.0002.0016.0333 at page 2, thank you. And you can see at point 5.3, Austrac Enforcement Investigation Crown Resorts Limited. And there's a note that there was a verbal update provided by the Deputy Director General regarding the Austrac Enforcement Investigation. Do you recall anything that you were told?
Yes, I remember the update.
What do you remember that you were told?
That Melbourne casino Crown Casino were under investigation from Austrac for transactions that were going through the South bank account.
Were you told anything about any other bank account?
I'm aware of the Riverbank bank account.
And was that part of the briefing that you received on the 27th of October?
On the 27th of October, we received the copy of the show cause notice that the Victorian regulator had issued to Crown on the back of the Austrac investigation into the South bank account. Did we discuss the Riverbank bank account? I can't recall specifically if we discussed it in that meeting.
Do you recall whether you discussed or whether it was reported to you that the Operation Angove report had made some findings about Crown's support to visa applicants?
We didn't discuss that.
And also during the 27th of October 2020 meeting, Crown gave a presentation on the Crown Reform Program. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And what was the substance of Crown's message that you took away from that presentation?
The substance of the message was that they were going to be making some significant improvements and take some very serious action against addressing any future potential risks in that area.
And did the GWC discuss what might be done within the Western Australian jurisdiction? In terms of investigations
Yes, we did.
or concerns?
Yes.
And what were the concerns discussed?
Obviously, the concerns were around Crown and the activities that had been happening in the past, and what was going to be the position of the GWC, what actions would we take.
And what was it resolved to do?
So we resolved that as the Ilga inquiry was well in advance and that the international borders were closed, there hadn't been any junkets operating for quite some time. I believe the state borders were still closed, that we would wait until the Bergen inquiry was completed and that they'd handed down their the findings, so as to not double up on the investigation that was already underway.
And how did the GWC inform itself as to the progress of the Bergen inquiry?
Well, we received verbal updates each meeting, but we would obviously follow it in the press.
And who did you receive the verbal updates from?
Mr. Connolly. There was more that he would update and then we would discuss.
So, to your knowledge, there was no formal communication channel between the GWC and the Bergen inquiry?
In January 2020, Duncan Ord met with Bergen, and there was some conversations around the GWC assisting going forward. So I believe that the communications were with Duncan Ord himself.
And to your knowledge, did those communications continue between January 2020 and February 2021 by Mr. Ord?
Not that I recall, not that I know of.
If we could go to the 24th of November 2020 meeting, dwc.002.0016.0335 at page 0007. And particularly item 12.3.
Commissioners, I hesitate to arise. I understand that there's a claim for privilege over the first paragraph of agenda item 12.3. And aspects of the heading, which are in the process of being provided to the solicitors assisting the Commission for redacted versions.
And the heading I can understand. I've often wondered about whether legal professional privilege applies to the fact of advice being sought, provided it doesn't indicate in any way the content of a privileged communication, a protected communication.
Yes, Commissioner, the difficulty being in the current context, that it suggests at least a subject of the advice that is being sought.
Who's made the claim? The department? Or
It's a claim that's been made on behalf of the Gaming and Wagering Commission, but supported by the department.
all right, if there's a claim that hasn't been yet resolved,
I'll leave it, thank you.
You can leave it.
Commissioners. We could move on to the meeting of the 15th of December 2020. And that can be taken down off the screen, thank you. Now, this was a meeting in which the Chair of Crown requested to attend the meeting. Do you recall that
Yes.
particular occasion? And you were given agenda papers for the 15th of December, and there was quite a number of pages that were given to you the night before, the 14th of December 2020. Do you recall that?
I don't believe that what you're referring to were our agenda papers. So we received the agenda papers several days earlier.
And so you did receive an email the night before?
I did not see an email, but yes, I understand. An email was sent after the close of business on the Monday evening,
And the meeting was to be held
8:30 Tuesday morning.
So when you say you didn't see the email,
I did,
you didn't read it before the meeting?
No.
Did you read it after the meeting?
No, I didn't actually.
And this is an email, just for the record, which is GW.
I read it, yes. I read it this morning, actually.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to put up on the screen, but for the record, it's GWC.0010.0010.002. Or perhaps if I could have it put up, but not on a public screen, just so I can confirm with the witness we're talking about the same email.
doesn't matter, don't worry.
And we could go to the next page, thank you. Is there no other page, Madam Associate? Thank you. It appears to be one page, so we'll go to the particular attachment in another document, GWC.002.0016.0345 at 0449. Is that the email that you read earlier this morning?
Yes, so if I could put some context around it, you see the heading of the previous email that you sent. This has had an 11 meg document attached to it called Crown Controls and Reforms, I believe is the heading of the email, which was sent after hours. When I arrived at the meeting in the morning, Mr. Barton was present and Helen Coonan called in, and they did a PowerPoint presentation that went for quite some time, which was called Crown Reform and the same title. I then presumed that the email that had been sent the night before was a version of that PowerPoint presentation that was then given that day. So when I returned to my office after the meeting and looked at the emails that I'd received, I saw the email heading, which was the same as the presentation that was given, and thought the two were the same, and didn't then go and download the 11 meg document, which I see is different than the presentation that was given.
Thank you. That can be taken down from the screen. Thank you, Madam Associate. And as a result of the presentation that you witnessed by Ms. Coonan and Mr. Barton, did that presentation cause any discussion amongst the GWC members, or what were the actions that were resolved to take after that presentation?
Sure. After the presentation, as well as questions that we asked Ms. Coonan and Mr. Barton, the Commission, the GWC, decided to issue a direction that Junkets, premium players, international gambling, should be formally suspended until further notice.
And during the presentation, well, I could ask this question. Having looked at the email this morning, did you look through the entire bundle of documents that was attached to the email this morning?
Yes, I had to skim through them because it was hundreds of pages and I needed to get here, but yes.
And do you recall that there was a particular report from Grant Thornton?
Yes.
Did you look at that report this morning?
Yes.
In the presentation that was given on the 15th of December 2020, did that address at all anything that you saw this morning in the Grant Thornton report?
There was no mention of the Grant Thornton report, if that's what, or any of the statistics or information that was included in the Grant Thornton report. No, none of that was mentioned. The presentation was all about I would say like a go forward position. This was all of the things that Crown was going to do going forward, or was in the process of doing, to address those issues.
Was there any discussion by Ms. Coonan or Mr. Barton about particular bank accounts and what had been occurring in the past, in the recent past, by Crown?
I don't recall any specifics about that. I do recall it was about improvements and matters going forward.
When you looked at the bundle this morning, do you recall seeing a report from a company called Initialism?
Yes.
And did you look at that report in some detail this morning?
Like very, very briefly. From the time I downloaded the reports to when I had to get here was a very short time period.
And what was your impression of what that report was about?
It was concerning.
In what aspect?
It was concerning the whole report, all of the reports, it was concerning that what looked like fairly obvious transactions, fairly obvious transactions, either had, that Crown had effectively turned a blind eye to them, or no one had noticed them, or that Austrac hadn't picked up on them earlier. It was all quite concerning.
And was it your view that the department or the GWC should have had any idea that that was occurring in the accounts?
Should we have had an idea that that was occurring in those accounts?
Or did you have any opportunity to overview those accounts?
I understand now that those bank statements were being sent through to the department, but the Commission had no knowledge of that.
When you say I understand that now, when did you get that information for the first time?
That the department was in possession of the bank statements. when we discovered several weeks ago that a subpoena or summons had been issued by Bergen to get copies of the bank statements in December, and that was when it became apparent that the bank statements were in the possession of the department. That's when I became aware of it.
So you found this out several weeks ago, so after the Bergen report had been released?
Yes. That we had the banks, that the department had copies of the bank statements, yes.
And did you find out at the same time that the Bergen inquiry had subpoenaed them in December, or did you know that in December 2020?
We did not know that in December.
So you found that out at the same time that you found out that the department had been in possession of the bank accounts?
Yes, because we knew about the summons and that the summons had been responded to.
When did you find out about the summons?
The first few days when the Royal Commission was asking for documents to be produced.
And do you know how the department came to get the bank records?
I now know that Crown provides documentation each month to the department and that those bank statements were included in the documentation provided each month.
But you hadn't been aware of that up until recently, is that correct? In February 2021, you had two GWC meetings that were very close together on the 17th of February and the 23rd of February 2021.
Yes.
And on the 23rd of February, the GWC considered a paper from a departmental employee regarding a recommendation to give a direction to ban junkets, premium players and privilege payers.
Yes.
And who had given the direction to that departmental employee to write that paper?
The GWC did in the December meeting.
And at the 23rd of February meeting, the GWC resolved to issue that direction and also to approve 2 casino gaming bank accounts. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And the day after that meeting, there was a media release from the GWC. If we could have that document, thank you. GWC.0016.0348 at pages 2 and 3. Did you have any input into writing that media release?
No.
Did you see it before it went out?
No.
Have you seen it before?
No.
This is the first time.
Yes.
Thank you, that can be taken down. Moving on just to talk quickly about management of conflicts of interest. In your statement at paragraph 19, you referred to Mr. Connolly taking you to a particular aspect of the Code of Conduct, which was the prohibition on you participating in gambling at the casino whilst being a member. So that's GWC.0003.007.0015 at 0007. And the document would go to 009 now, please. Sorry, I got the wrong page. Perhaps the easiest way to do it is to take you to the 2018 Code of Conduct, which is GWC.001.007.0188 at 0009. So that document talks in find a particular sentence. The second paragraph, last sentence, about the Commission appropriately managing any conflicts of interest in the public interest and the interests of the Commission. And what's been your experience briefly about how the Commission has managed conflicts of interest?
With regards to the GWC members,
Yes.
during every meeting, we have a standing agenda item, which is where we announce any conflicts of interest. Recently, we put in a new policy in place that requires the completion of a form that is submitted if anybody has any conflicts, and we manage those accordingly.
Did you have any oversight as a GWC member of any conflicts that the departmental employees who were putting up the agenda papers might have had?
Well, yes, that Mick Connolly notified of a perceived conflict of interest in a meeting in October 2020.
And is that what was the substance of that declaration?
That he had a friendship with one of a Crown employee who was a Claude Murray, I believe his name is, who'd recently been promoted to a senior legal position at Crown, and that they were fishing buddies, and that they regularly went fishing together. But Mr. Connolly assured us that they never discussed anything to do with work.
And was there discussion amongst the Commission members as to how to manage that declaration?
Immediately after, no. I think everybody was just taken aback, and there was a lot going on in that particular meeting. In my mind, I knew that I would manage that particular conflict within the context of that meeting if it was required, but in meetings like that, the GWC asks lots of the questions, so I was comfortable going forward in that particular meeting that Mick would be like an observer.
Was there any discussion about how that conflict would be managed in an ongoing basis? Not just in that meeting, but in the future?
No, but then I do understand that Duncan Ord launched an investigation into Mr. Connolly, and then obviously before the February meeting took place, it was no longer an issue.
Why was there not a January meeting?
So there's not usually a meeting in January. I unfortunately turned up to the January meeting, and it wasn't on. In the December meeting, there were some discussions about whether there would be a January meeting, and it would be dependent. It was decided that it would be dependent on whether the Bergen report had been handed down or not. So therefore, it didn't happen. It hadn't, so it didn't happen in January, and we had the extra one in February.
And when you found out about Mr. Connolly's relationship with Mr. Murray, were you given a sense of how long he'd had that relationship for?
I believe that they had been friends for quite some time, and I had thought about it quite a lot over the Christmas break, and it was my intention in the January meeting to have a discussion around that. But yeah, as I said, there was no one else at the January meeting.
Did it cause you to reflect on the impartiality of any advice he might have given in previous meetings?
did I reflect on that? I have always found Mick Connolly to be professional, and I didn't believe because he had a fishing relationship with this individual that it would impact his the quality of his work.
Was there any discussion in the GWC about Mr Connolly remaining as a deputy chair of the committee?
No.
Do you know why that was?
Why there hadn't been a discussion around it. The meetings around that time were, there was a lot of very complicated issues that were being addressed at the time, and it was really a lot of high tension going on, and I think that that we probably should, or absolutely should have had more discussions around it, but there was just a lot going on in those meetings.
So it might have been an oversight.
Yes.
Were you or the GWC involved in appointing Mr Beecroft as the acting chief casino officer?
In a paper was put up. We didn't select him, but he was the obvious choice within the department to do that. But I understand that we're not involved in the selection process. But I believe that we did have a paper put forward where we were requested to support the appointment of Mr Beecroft.
And why do you say that the GWC is not to be involved in the appointment of the chief casino officer?
We weren't involved in it.
Right. Could you have been involved if you wanted to be?
I would imagine so, but it was a fairly obvious appointment in that time period where one needed to be appointed very quickly, and he was the logical, obvious choice for that quick resolution. As to what the plan is going forward, I'm unsure, but in the time of needing to have one appointed, he was the obvious choice.
So you'd had some experience of dealing with Mr Beecroft?
Yes. So in particular, if Mr Connolly was unavailable or on leave or the like, then he would step up.
Turning briefly to the delegations that were in place between the GWC and the department, you mentioned at the beginning of your evidence that you weren't given any instruction as to what delegations were in place when you were appointed. How did you come to know, or who had delegations and over what particular powers?
In the in our board papers at the end, or towards the end, we receive like notings of any delegations that have been exercised during the month. Other delegations, for example, in I believe it was March, we gave delegations to Mr Connolly to be able to handle the COVID situation with Crown needing to shut down at any time, and the very quick changes that were going on in the world at that time around whether the casino could stay open or whether it needed to have smaller or larger numbers, or if it just needed to close the doors. If it needs to shut down, there's procedures and or they might need some guidance or legal approval to do things from the GWC. And we were heading into a weekend, and we gave Mr Connolly permission to be able to, or delegations to be able to handle that on our behalf.
And on the 16th of February 2021, you also gave Mr Beecroft's position, the Director of Strategic Regulations, delegations. Do you recall that?
Yes, as he was going to be stepping up and taking over Mr Connolly's roles in that area.
Were you aware of whether Mr Ord held any delegations in his role as Director General or Chair?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Are you aware of any delegation register being held by the department?
I'm not aware of a register.
Nothing further, thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. I would like to finish this afternoon. Is there likely to be any lengthy cross-examination or re-examination?
Not lengthy, Commissioner, no.
Ms Meadows, I'll probably be about 10 minutes. Are you happy to continue, or would you prefer a break? Would you like a break before we?
No, if it's 10
Fine.
minutes more, I'm good.
All
Please
right.
continue.
Ms Darmananda?
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms Meadows, in your witness statement, we don't need to go to it, paragraph 48, you mentioned a presentation made by Crown. If I could take you, please, to the meeting minutes from that meeting, which is DWC 0002 0016 0286. You're in attendance there, Ms Meadows.
Yes, that's me.
And if you look further down the page, you'll see also attendances. There's a reference to Mr Preston, to whom you referred,
Yes,
and then there's a reference to Mr Murray. Do you see that?
yes,
Yet in your witness statement you refer to the CEO presenting. Were you in error in that regard?
it would appear so.
So there were other presentations given by Crown from time to time, were there not?
Yes, there are presentations given by Crown very regularly.
So, but the presentation to which you make reference in paragraph 48 is not one that the CEO attended.
It wouldn't appear so.
And you've given some evidence this afternoon about the GWC's approach not to double up on any inquiry. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Was the GWC of the mind that they should await the outcome of the Bergen inquiry? Is that how you decided to proceed?
before we would decide what our course of action would be.
Yes.
Yes. So, we also didn't want to utilise or use up Crown's resources as well, whilst they were already answering queries from Bergen.
Yes, and were you aware that there was also an inquiry that was taking place in Victoria?
Yes,
So was it the decision made by the GWC to await the outcome of those inquiries before taking any steps?
yes,
And so if, as you say, the presentation in August, as adverted to in paragraph 48, was obstructive, what would you have done differently?
if Crown had said, well, we would have taken different action. What would we have done differently?
Yes.
I'm sure as a commission we would have discussed it and then worked out what our course of action would
But you'd
be.
already determined to await the inquiry's outcome in Victoria and in New South Wales.
That was more recently.
When was the Bergen inquiry announced?
It was more that the information that was coming out of the Bergen inquiry that contradicted this was later.
That is so. Would you accept that the Bergen inquiry was announced on the 14th of August 2019?
I'm not sure of the date, but if that's when you tell me it was announced, then that's when it was announced.
Thank you.
Mr Person?
Yes, Commissioner. Just a couple of questions for Ms Meadows. Ms Meadows, you were asked some questions by a councillor assisting about an agenda paper recommending a reduction in the casino licence fee. And in response, you said that I think you had some disagreement with the recommendation from the department.
Well, we had a discussion in the GWC, yes. It was often, have robust discussions where people didn't agree with things, but we would land on a response.
And in terms of the recommendations offered by the department generally, you weren't required to adopt those recommendations.
No.
And you didn't consider yourself under an obligation to adopt the recommendation.
Absolutely not.
And you would apply your own independent mind
Yes.
in the context of the GWC committee meetings to reach a decision as a committee.
Yes.
You were also asked by council assisting about some questions in relation to the KPI review that the GWC was seeking for its own benefit as opposed to the Auditor General
Yes.
KPIs. And you referred to the delay in the briefing of an external consultant in December 2019 as a result of COVID coming shortly after the decision was made to brief.
No. So we agreed to appoint a consultant in December, and then those consultants were to be briefed towards the end of January, when Mr Connolly reduced his annual leave by 1 week to make himself available to do that. And then Risk West presumably then went on to do their work. We never then received the report, or COVID happened and then it was stalled.
So COVID-19 had an impact
Yes,
on the report
yes.
as you
Well,
understand it.
Yes, yes. Well, the department, obviously looking after, sure, the casino closed, but the sports and cultural side of the department then became under significant pressure because those two areas were heavily impacted by COVID, whereas the casino closed down. So.
And the department was involved in the general response to COVID-19 in the state, as you understand.
Yes, yes, yes.
And
in relation to Crown as well, and of course racing and wagering, which continued.
And prior to COVID occurring, at paragraph 37 of your statement, and I don't need to take you to that, you referred to your time commitment as a member of the GWC increasing as a result of the sale of the TAB, the Bergen inquiry, and then moving to this year, the commencement of this Royal Commission.
Yes.
And it's fair to say that those taxes on your time also impacted on the departmental resourcing and the department's ability to resource the commission.
Absolutely, yes.
And at paragraph 49 of your statement, you note that, in your view, the GWC has been obstructed by resourcing issues within the department, which you then go on to discuss. And that's just the general resourcing limitations that are placed on the department and the officer's ability to respond.
Yes, yes. And if I could add to that, that's more in particular in the senior levels. Mr Connolly when he did the presentation about planning to restructure the department to better support us, there was comments made around the lack of level 8s and level 9s. Our interaction was with the more senior people, and that seemed to be where the issue that was impacting the GWC was the lack of the very senior people that would assist us.
And at paragraph 75 of your statement, you also raise some inadequacies with the board papers. And you note, in particular, an issue with the minutes at 75.4, which you raised at the most recent meeting, and that change has been implemented.
Yes.
And those other issues that you've raised in paragraph 75, have they been raised with members of the GWC or the department?
No, these are, so to have strategic offsite sessions has been raised, and we have one scheduled for the 2nd of June with third-party facilitators. And during that process, that is when I will be suggesting that all of these matters, annual review of board performance, annual KPI settings, skills matrix reviews, etc., will be scheduled to be completed throughout the year.
So they're constructive matters for you to raise
Yes.
at that
Yes.
occasion. Nothing further, Commissioner.
Thank you.
One, Ms Meadows, we talked about the resources that the GWC, the resources that are provided by the department to GWC, and GWC funds those.
Yes.
When you're told about the cost of those resources, are you simply presented with a charge, or do you have details of what's been provided?
We're presented with a charge. The budget exactly equals the actuals every month, and then the final expense for the year appears in the financial statements. So my assumption would be that the Office of the Auditor General, when they are reviewing the financial statements, would be looking at the underlying calculation of how the departmental cost is split.
Thanks, that's fine. Thanks, Commissioner. Thank you.
Ms Meadows, the paragraph of your witness statement to which Mr Burson just took you, skills matrix reviews
Yes,
in time to make recommendations to the Minister before appointments are decided.
yes.
In the period since you have been on the Commission, have you ever been consulted about the appointment of new members?
No, we haven't. When Professor Hayward was, we were advised that it was going to be her last meeting, the next meeting. I suggested that we go through a skills matrix exercise so that we could put forward suggestions as to what skills we thought we needed. And Mr Ord advised that the Minister had already made the selections as to who would be joining. So we weren't asked. I tried to suggest that we should, and I hope that going forward now that we will be able to put in place that we can give some suggestions.
Thank you. Now, I want to ask you a series of questions. This is relating to the question of detection of money laundering.
Yes.
So there's a series of questions I'm going to ask you about that topic. And can I go back? You have had experience as an auditor,
Yes.
and if I may say so, as a gratuitous aside, probably at a time when audit was properly done because the auditor wielded a green pen.
Yes.
And would you agree that the purpose of, and I'm standing back now, not necessarily talking about an audit by the GWC or departmental officers of the casino, but audit generally, that the purpose of audit is more than just identifying erroneous recording of financial transactions or inappropriate treatment of various expenses and revenue, but also to look for systemic errors within the recording and reporting system of the organisation concerned. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Resulting always in the end in the opinion as to whether the financial statements give a true and fair view.
Yes.
Could I ask that the witness statement, Ms Meadows' witness statement, be brought up? It's GWC.0003. It's there. And could we go to page 18 and have page 19 there as well? I want to take you first to the first sentence of paragraph 59. Could you just remind yourself of what you say there? That money laundering risks do not fall within the remit of the GWC. See that? No? And
Yes,
it's because, is it not according to your statement, that they're within the remit of other law enforcement agencies?
Yes, I think by that, though, when I'm talking about money laundering, I'm talking about financial transactions going through bank accounts and the ability to be able to look behind those financial transactions.
What I'm interested in is those words do not fall within the remit of the GWC. That's what I'm really exploring. And then if we go down to paragraph 60.1, one of the buttresses of that view that you've taken is the Victorian Regulatory Authority's media release. And that's GWC.003.0007.0012, if that could be brought up. And if I could ask you to look at particularly the second sentence of the first paragraph. Now you'll see that this is, the context of this media release is casino junket operators, and it mentions Austrac, so it can be inferred that money laundering might be an issue which was involved in the Victorian regulator's decision to issue this press release. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So if you see the second sentence, the regulator approves systems of internal controls and administrative and accounting procedures, ensures Crown complies with these internal controls through regular monitoring and compliance activities. Would you agree with me that audit may be a useful tool for monitoring and compliance activities of a regulator?
Yes.
Right. And then if we go to the third last paragraph, would you read that, please?
Out loud.
As one of the number of regulators.
The Division works proactively with relevant regulators and law enforcement agencies, including Vic Police and Austrac. Any matters that fall outside their remit are referred to the relevant agency.
Now, in the time that you've been on the commission, would it be accurate to substitute the GWC for the VCGLR in the first sentence of that third last paragraph?
It wouldn't be, because the Western Australian regulator doesn't proactively work with Austrac and WA Police. That's my understanding, that we don't proactively work with them.
All right. Now, can we go back to the statement, the witness statement? And can I ask you to, this is the GWC.0003. Now, if we could go to page 19. And if you have a look at the paragraph 61, are you aware of the, I'm sorry, could you just refresh your memory as to what you said in paragraph 61?
Yes.
And you refer there to whether audits covered those matters.
Yes, I asked that as a question. So I know that the casino operating manual says that a transaction over $10,000 needs to be reported, but I asked the question, as you do in a board meeting where you phrase things as questions. So I asked that question knowing that that is in the operating manual, but I wanted to find out if that was something in particular we were auditing.
And were you given an answer to that?
No, I haven't been given an answer yet.
From your knowledge of the way in which audit and inspection occurs at the casino, do you know of any reason why audit could not look at those sorts of transactions, the bank statements and other material towards that end?
I can't see why they couldn't do that. If it does say in the casino operating manual, which I believe it does, that transactions over 10,000 need to be reported to AUSTRAC, then it doesn't help with transactions that are $8,000 or $9,000 or those sorts of transactions. But yes, I can't see why that couldn't be something that the inspectors were checking if they're not checking it already.
And if audit of that type were to be done, might it not assist in the detection of systemic error that resulted in perhaps inadvertent non-disclosure of those materials?
Yes.
And from that perspective, do you draw a distinction between detection of suspect transactions or illegal transactions for the purpose of prosecuting for a breach of the criminal law on the one hand, and detection of systemic errors that indicate a problem within the operating procedures of the gaming operations of the casino?
It's a very long question.
So on the one hand, you've got the law enforcement side, which
Yes.
is you investigate activities
Yes. Yeah.
for the purpose of prosecuting if there has been a breach of the criminal law.
Yes.
That's the one on the one hand. But you also investigate to detect errors which might indicate that the controls and procedures which are in place are ineffective or inappropriate for the task for which they've been implemented.
So I believe that that's what the inspectors are doing. They're testing. They're testing they're testing a lot of Crown's internal procedures all of the time. I believe that that's what their job is to do.
But whether those investigations go to the issues which you raised in the second sentence of section 60 of paragraph 61 of your witness statement is at present an unanswered question.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Can I come back to the question of delegation?
Yes.
What's your understanding of the power that the Gaming and Wagering Commission, the board members, retain in relation to matters which have been delegated either to the Casino Control Officer or to some other person within the department?
The powers that we do still retain, that we could cease that delegation at any point.
I can, if you wish, take you to examples, but what seems to be the practice is that at each monthly meeting, the commission members are given a list of the exercises of delegated
Yes.
power. But it seems to be, according to the notations in the minutes, for noting.
Oh, I see. So we could overturn it. The things that we do delegate, my understanding is that they're operational type matters. But I would then think that if something is included and it is for noting, that we could overturn it.
Has that ever arisen in your time on the commission?
I've never seen anything come through one of the delegations that was, that was not operational or we knew that we were giving that delegation, like around the COVID type delegations. There's never been anything there that has caused concern. I'm sure if there was, we would raise it and it would be addressed. I wouldn't just assume that we would then just note it and move on if there was something in there that was of concern to us.
Thank you. Can I take you to paragraph 73 of your witness statement? Now, can you see that it's the third sentence which attracted my attention?
Yes.
In the light of the discussion that I've had with you about what audits are done in this financial area that might lead to a detection of systemic error, can you amplify that third sentence?
Yeah, I don't know, in the agenda papers, if you, the board papers, you'll see there's tables of information that is presented that shows the results of all the inspections that have been done through the month. And so I guess my point here was that you can't really see from the information that's presented what it is they're trying to achieve with each of the audits that's been done. And when I first came to be a commissioner, there was all these reports with figures and numbers, and you didn't really. It was difficult to see what it was we were trying to achieve with them. So if the reporting was clearer to show this is the outcome that we're trying to achieve and this is why we're auditing these particular areas, then it might have been easier to see what areas were being covered and what areas weren't being covered. But I don't know, I'm not sure if you've seen the spreadsheets that are some of them are quite difficult to read. It doesn't really set out clearly what the audit program is and what's been trying to be achieved by it.
All right, thank you. Ms Nelson, anything arising from that?
No, thank you, Commissioner.
Mr Evans.
Try one question, which may miscarry horribly, we'll see. Ms Meadows, you were talking, Mr Darman taxed you with the proposition that the GWC had effectively already made up its mind not to do anything at the time of the Crown presentation in August.
In
August of 2019.
No. That Crown had made up its mind not to
No,
do
so
anything.
the GWC had made up its mind that it would await the outcome of other inquiries before considering taking any action in relation to Crown at the time of the presentation.
No, we hadn't decided that before the August 2019 meeting.
That was what I thought. Can I take you to something in particular which you put in your statement that you felt obstructed by some aspects of Crown's presentation? This also crosses over to something that the Commissioner put to you. Now, the difficulty is there is a non-publication application in relation to the actual presentation itself, and I think it would assist Ms. Meadows if she actually saw one paragraph. I think the document can be brought up on screen without appearing publicly, as I understand it. The document, if that can be the case, the document is GWC.0001.0009.0001. Can I go to page 7 of that presentation? Can I invite your attention to the bottom bullet point in relation to bank accounts? You gave some evidence in response to questions from Ms Nelson about becoming aware of the existence of other bank accounts only relatively recently.
I believe I said that I wasn't aware that the department had those bank statements in its possession.
And you became aware of the Riverside bank accounts on what occasion?
When I became aware of the Riverside bank accounts was through the media around the time of the Bergen inquiry. But I do believe that it has been that name of that bank account was shown in a presentation to us at some point.
When you look at that bullet point, do you, can you tell me what impression you get from reading that bullet point? Whether had you known that the South Bank and Riverside accounts were in existence at that time, you might have formed a different view? About things that might be done?
Is that a correct factual basis? I can't remember the date upon which those accounts were closed.
Nor can I, Frank, Commissioner.
I have a feeling it was before 2019.
Yeah, I think it was December 2019. The Riverbank account was.
This is August 2019.
The
The point may not ultimately go anywhere, Commissioner.
Right.
So it's if it did cause Ms Meadows to consider anything further. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Ms Meadows, we're running a system where we're having simultaneous hearings, and so for that reason, the other commissioner will watch the videos and read the transcript. So I can't release you from the effect of the summons at the moment, because the process we're going to use is that if there are further questions that arise from that process, they'll be relayed to you through the Commission's solicitors, and then we'll try desperately not to call you back, and only do so if it's unavoidable. But we'll give you the opportunity to answer the questions in writing. But until that's done, and then you will be formally released in writing from the effect of the summons. But until that time, the summons is still in force. But thank you very much for your assistance. It has been of great help to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Commissioner, before we do rise, I just raised two issues in relation to privilege. There appears to be an inadvertent disclosure at GWC 0002 0016 0300, which we will correspond with the solicitors assisting the Commission on. And out of fairness to those assisting the Commission, including counsel assisting Mr Evans, I note that the issue I raised in relation to GWC 0002 0016 0345 is not the subject of any correspondence with the solicitors assisting the Commission. Rather, it was identified during this morning's proceedings and hasn't yet been communicated.
That was the heading and the...
Yes, Commissioner.
All right, thank you for that. We'll resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow.